It's nothing really short of incredible.
Fish on First Live. Here we are, presented by La Pop as usual. LAPOP. Check them out in Doral and schedule your visit at lapop.com/services. I am your temporary host, maybe your first half host before Daniel gets here. It's Eli Sussman. It's Nick Tarak down at the bottom. And special guest, I think his second time on the stream, his first time this year. It's Travis Riley checking in from the West Coast. How's everything going,
Thanks for having me back. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And there's a ton, gazillion stuff to get to. The final home stands of the first half of the season, the final full week heading into the All-Star break. And this Marlins team, better than anybody could have reasonably expected at this stage of the season. Things going pretty well despite the sweep against the Braves. We're going to get into that in a moment. The first thing I wanted to touch on is on Sunday, the confirmation that Jorge Soler going to the All-Star game as a reserve, joining Luis Arraez. So the Marlins once again getting multiple representatives. Soler being a really unusual case in that he's a Marlins free agent signing for this team that for decades has whiffed on these free agents or traded them before they really gave them much of value. You know, Soler having an amazing first half and getting rewarded for it as a reserve. And Travis, I think you were at the game when they were out against the Angels, and that was right in the middle of Soler's hottest streak when he was hitting homers every single day on that road trip. So I think you got to see him even in person at least one time this year. Just your thoughts on him getting a nod as, I guess, the backup DH in the NL.
Oh, it's well-deserved. Not only did I get to see him in person, he signed the hat I'm wearing right here.
Oh, let's get a good look at that.
Yeah. Arraez and Skip, all three signed it, and they're having some breakout years, all three of them. So I don't want to say I have a lucky head, but, you know, you can't prove that I don't. Yeah, I'm really happy for Jorge. Honestly, like I was one of those haters or skeptics before the season started, not on Jorge necessarily, but on maybe the Marlins' chances. And I had Jorge right up there with our friend Avi Garcia as maybe a free agent bust. And I didn't expect him to do anything like he's doing this season. And he's been great. I know he gets some cold streaks, but the power's been incredible, and I'm really happy for him. I'm excited to see him get some time in the All-Star game.
Yeah. What about you, Nick, with Soler getting in here? Like he's the guy that has been, he's been surprisingly the biggest thing for me, at least, is the durability too. Like last year, obviously missed most of the year with his back issue. So far this year, he's played in almost every single game with only a couple exceptions. Like that's kind of been such a big part of this, not just how good he is, but the fact that he's been available and hitting near the top of the lineup almost every single night.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's totally well-deserved how he's doing this year. And the home runs, I mean, he's hitting a little more than you expected, but they're not really a surprise that he's hitting a bunch of home runs. You know, that's what he does. But he's been able to get on base a pretty decent amount, which has been, I think, a huge benefit to the team and just at the top of the lineup. Because if you have Arraez and Soler, if they both get on base, you're just setting yourself up to succeed. So I think it's really well-deserved for him. And he's having a great year so far as that backup DH role. I think it'll be a fun little trip for him and Arraez. Get to go to Seattle, have a good time, and then hopefully kind of rejuvenate themselves back into the lineup and really get going again after this kind of Brave series. Not fun for anyone on the Marlins, but go back into that, and I think it'll be exciting for him. Well-deserved.
Yeah. Kevin is at the ballpark. We're going to bring him on the stream in a few minutes here. For people wondering about the home run derby, Soler not going to participate in it. Mainly, it seems due to just concerns about his health as a guy that has been fortunate so far. Things going pretty smoothly here to this point in the season. He doesn't want to do anything super strenuous to potentially screw it up. As we got Daniel finally hopping in. But Daniel, we were just talking about the Jorge Soler getting the All-Star nod, and now this news today that he's not going to do the Derby, even though he's presumably been invited for it. Your just thoughts on that before you take the helm here.
I would love to see Jorge Soler in the Derby. We've seen a recent announcement from a plethora of different guys. Adley Rutschman just announced his. I believe, who else? I think Vladdy is doing it. I'm not sure. I know a whole bunch of other guys are coming. Pete Alonso just re-announce he's going to do it there, try to get for 3. I would love to see Jorge Soler do it. I'm not really one of those people that the home run derby is just going to affect you and your swing and everything like that. I'm in the mindset where, these guys are major leaguers. They know what they're getting into. They understand coming out of it. I don't think, you go and you have a couple home runs in the home run derby, you're not going to hit a home run for the rest of the season. I would love to see Jorge Soler. It would be great for baseball. It would even be better for the Marlins to have that type of notoriety and just having that platform for them. And Jorge Soler is honestly a guy that could possibly win it also. I think that's a guy that could definitely go toe-to-toe with Pete Alonso and guys like that. I would personally love to see it, but if he doesn't want to do it, I'm not also opposed to it.
From here, we should hop into the Braves series quickly before going
we
into
have
our
to?
press box report. Quickly. The way that it's turned out, we could speed through it, man. Woo! Where do you want to go with this?
Oh man, it's bad when a reliever is the only bright spot the whole series. We could start in that first game with Brian Hoeing. We can go in order there. Brian Hoeing is a pitcher that had a lot of gave Marlins a lot of hope. Probably not going to the Braves series, but almost as a spot starter type. His previous 2 starts were just incredible, including the one before the Braves when we had 5 no-hit innings. And it turned horrid. It was not great. It was not great at all. But the Braves are the better team. I think we all knew this coming in. I think we were just praying for them to just even get one win. But the Braves show that they are the best team in baseball. They have the best lineup, the best players. Travis, I would love to hear your thoughts on that first game from the Marlins. And when the Marlins go down 5-0 in the first inning, did you think, oh, all right, there goes the whole series?
It's demoralizing. I did think that exactly that. You hold on to some hope for, I don't know, the first couple pitches, the top of the inning doesn't go that well, if I remember correctly. And then you go to the bottom of the inning and you're like, all right, maybe we can keep it close. And then they go up big and pretty much felt like a sweep right then. I don't know. All the games kind of blend together for me. Just the pitching getting demolished is the part that really hurts me. I've been putting on my tinfoil hat and reading into all these Braves are cheaters theories online since the series ended, not because I believe it to be true, but because I want to believe it to be true, because it was just so sad to watch.
Yeah. And this is the way everything goes. Obviously, I don't think at all there was any cheating involved. What you see on social media and everything that happened in that space is honestly believe there was zero cheating. Braves are just that good, and it's just so difficult when you see them. You see these 6 runs, 7 runs. Marlins just getting 7 runs in the entire series, where the Braves got maybe 5 touchdowns worth. I can imagine, they must be cheating, but obviously, they're just way better than the Marlins are at this point. Nick, I want to hear your thoughts on Yuri Perez, on just his, game against the Braves, giving up that many runs and not even getting through 2 outs. Really quickly before we bring Kevin on, I want to hear your thoughts on Yuri, what we can expect him later against the Cards.
With Yuri, I don't think I don't want to say I'm worried, because I feel like the Braves are a phenomenal team. There's no doubt about it. We know how good they are and the type of hitters they have. And I think it was probably just a case of just a young 20-year-old kid that met a really, really good team and just had a bad day. So I think if I'm excited to see him in his next outing, to see how he can bounce back from that. This is his first real piece of adversity he's faced in his career so far at all throughout the majors. He hasn't really faced that many tough times throughout his career so far this year. So I think seeing this first piece of adversity, it wasn't really a small piece of adversity too. He got lit up that game. He gave up 5 runs, only got 2 outs, or you said didn't even get 2 outs. But I think seeing how he pitches against the Cardinals is going to be a really big testament to see what kind of person he is, what kind of pitcher he is. And I think it'll be really crucial for him to go out there and at least pitch a pretty decent game against the Cardinals and bounce back.
We'll get a little more in this series really quickly, but before that, let's bring in our very own Kevin Ballard in his press box report. He is there with Isaac Azut, who did his first ever interview ever in history with top prospect Dane Myers. You can see behind me. So let's bring in Kev in his beautiful brown shirt. There we go.
What's up?
You sound underwater. You sound like
Yeah.
Lewis when we talk to him.
Isaac's voice is underwater. We're here. You fine.
Talk, Kevin?
Hello?
Okay, yeah, you're good. Isaac sounds like Lewis right now.
Oh, I'll give him the powers later to speak. But yeah, spoke to Dane Myers. He took a flight today at 10:45. They informed him at 7 in the morning that he would be coming to Miami in place of Jazz. Jazz seems rarely optimistic. He's pretty optimistic that he'll be back after the All-Star break. And as always, good vibes all around this team. Nothing crazy. We have a couple of TV channels here today. CBS is here. And obviously, another storyline, Skip facing, going up against his whole team. Not only that he played for, but he was the bench coach.
Yeah. Associate manager last year, I think was his official title.
Talk to us a little bit. We have him on screen now before we go into maybe what you saw from the Cards. Talk to us about Dane Myers and give us Isaac's opinion on meeting him first glance, and did he fall in love immediately?
Dane's a cool guy. He was very grateful for the opportunity. Obviously, when I spoke to him with Alex Barber on Swimming Upstream last week, he mentioned that he really could play anywhere and he wants to continue to improve playing everywhere. But his main two positions that he feels the best at right now are third base and first base. Maybe we'll see him in the lineup tomorrow. Today was very short notice of a call up for him. So maybe he pinch hits late in the game. But right now, I expect him really to take over in the outfield, if I had to guess, especially with Jazz out. And we'll see. He's very excited. He's very grateful to be up here. He's been great. He spoke to Isaac. That interview should be up fairly soon. It was 30 seconds. So we'll see. We'll see. But Dane Myers is here, and he's ready to go. He's very excited. And I did forget to mention, he spoke to Jazz. So he's someone, he mentioned Jazz when it came to someone who he's really been able to get along with. Just, because Jazz was in AAA doing the rehab assignment, and now he's here in the big leagues. So we're very excited. And yeah.
Yeah, I should mention a shameless plug that if 30 seconds isn't enough, people can hear 30 minutes of Dane talking to you and Alex Carver. That's right here. You can find it on the Fish on First podcast and right here on the YouTube stream. That was a conversation we just had last week. So really auspicious timing that he gets called up right after doing
that. Kevin, you're there with the Cards in action. Tell us a little bit what you see from the St. Louis Cardinals. They are having a down season, but they do have the reigning MVP. They have Nolan Arenado, future Hall of Famer. They have a whole bunch of plethora of players. They have top prospect Jordan Walker. I can go on and on. But talk to us what you saw from the Cardinals bullpen, or not bullpen, dugout.
Nothing much. Just a lot of studs, as you mentioned. From top to bottom of that lineup, you have Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, guys who are very well proven in this league and all-stars. Jordan Walker, who, not spoken about much because of the situation with the Cardinals, but he's been one of the better rookies in baseball this year. And then obviously tonight we see Miles Michaelis. Skip spoke to us a little bit about Isaac, turn that shit down. I can hear it. And then Skip says never count out the Cardinals. And that's something he's made very clear. He said it's a little weird to face his former team, but he's excited. And really, it's just the pitching for the Cardinals because their offense is really damn good. And you mentioned it, Daniel, from top to bottom, they're a really good team. Watching them take BP was pretty impressive. Dylan Carlson was just hitting second deckers. You also had Jordan Walker, very tall guy. I know we saw him in spring training, but this time, it's the first time I've been able to see him up close. And he's a very tall, strong guy. And he hit a couple second deckers too. So fun team to watch. And it's going to be a good game. You can never count out the Cardinals. And I think that's the main point of this series.
Is there any injury updates you want to touch on before we get you out of here? Because there were quite a few of them pregame.
Well, Edward Cabrera threw a bullpen. That's encouraging to see. And then you have Cueto. I guess he'll try to go 7 innings tonight. Max Meyer is going to start a bullpen progression, which is nice to see. Besides that, I guess Rogers is still not throwing. That's a big one there. He was placed on the 60-day, I think, a couple weeks ago. And then Matt Barnes is going to start going, back-to-back outings there. So not much in the injury report. Nice to see that Max Meyer's kind of getting it going there. And then Isaac didn't put it, the Benders throwing from 120 feet.
Yeah, if I would give you an over-under 4.5 innings for Cueto tonight, they want him to go 7. I'll give you 4.5 as the over-under. You're going under?
Way under. I'll go like 2 innings.
Oh my God. Kevin, before you go, is there anything that people can expect interview-wise? We have Isaac making his debut, but are you coming back? You got anybody?
I went blank.
We have this. This is what the people want. This is an exclusive. You have to be a super subscriber if you want this interview from our friend Alex Verheide. All right, this is what the people actually want.
I went in blank today. I couldn't get anyone, but yeah, make sure to listen to Isaac's interview. First ever on-field interview. This is historical day for Fish on First. So yeah, just stay tuned. I'll have an article up on Dane Myers, and Isaac should have your recap if he stays.
Did you send the prediction video, or is that something we can expect later?
It's coming. It's coming.
Okay. All right. So that's Kevin Isaac with the Press Box Report, as always. Now, going back a little bit to this Brave series, let's go ahead and talk about that final game, Sandy versus Spencer Strider. If you looked at in the schedule at the start of the season and you saw these two players going at it, that's a game that you have to circle. That's like a nationally televised type atmosphere game where all eyes are watching, with most likely the Cy Young Award winner this year going up against the one last year. Eli, what did you see from that almost battle between the two pitchers? And just with Sandy, did you see him have his continued struggles, or did you believe this was a start that might give him some hope for the rest of the season?
It honestly kind of looked like both guys' season as a whole, where not everything is clicking quite the way that it was last year for either of them. The Marlins probably should have scored more than they did against Strider. They rallied for a couple runs in that inning thanks to Arise, I think Jonathan Davis, and it felt like they could have even cashed in a little more than they did. And if they were at full strength for that particular game, he still got his strikeouts and he still went relatively deep into the game, but it wasn't quite as dominant as we saw last year. With Sandy, this was we saw little bits and pieces of an issue that he's had throughout this year, but what was even new and kind of concerning is how inefficient he was. The fact that he only went 5 innings. This was one of his shortest starts of the year, even though the run total against him wasn't that huge. It's just he was inefficient. He wasn't putting guys away that easily. They were working up his pitch count. And again, we saw little fragments of this defensive block that he kind of has in his head, both him and I should say Stallings as well. There was a stolen base against him that Stallings made it worse by an inaccurate throw that went to center field. And then Stallings let that run come in on a pass ball as well. There was also some bad luck. If you look at the Ozzy Albies home run that just barely snuck over the wall and put the Braves ahead for good, that's a ball that at Lone Depot Park, it probably stays in here as well as a lot of other parks. So that was one where it wasn't even totally barreled up and still went over the wall and still cost the team a couple runs. In that case, it's really kind of in epitome of what Sandy's mediocre first half has been, where he's just not quite as good, but also just not quite as lucky. All things considered, his velocity was fine. This was maybe the best velocity he's had all year. He was consistently 99 in this game, touching 100 on several of his heaters. There were good innings, and there were that one bad inning in the 5th inning. So that's kind of the biggest carrying card of this season, is having that one crooked number in his game that obviously bloats the ERA and usually leads the Marlins to lose those starts.
Yeah, and with the Marlins just really did get dominated by the Braves. And Nick, I wanted to ask you, when watching this series, was there any bright spots at all that you saw from Miami that they can maybe have on maybe coming into this series against the Cardinals? Were there any bright spots, if at all, by the Fish against the Braves?
I don't know. If I'm honest, if I'm the Marlins team, if I'm Skip, if I'm a player on the Marlins, I'm just trying to leave that in the past and pretend like it never happened. Because honestly, I mean, going into this year, how they've been the whole year, Marlins team has been pretty dang good. It's been a really good team. And you would think going into this Braves series, supposed to be a huge series, get ready, especially for the Sunday game. Sandy and Strider was going to be this big game. Then they just overmatched. And every aspect of the game in every single game. It just seems like they didn't even compete at a level to where it was just kind of ugly. Like, it's hard to imagine like these thoughts of the Marlins making the postseason, making a World Series run, but then you watch that Braves here and so they didn't even really compete that much. So the hope is kind of just forget about it. And when they play the Braves again, say, oh, I don't even remember that last series. Let's go into this and let's just get excited to play again. Because that series was just rough as a whole.
Yeah. And before we go in and talk a little bit more, maybe about the All-Star game and futures and whatnot, Eli, I wanted to ask you, I'm looking at everything here. Brazoban technically is the only active roster member of the Marlins to get almost a star here, player of the game type. We also have George Soriano. I know he's not on the 26-man roster currently, but what did you see from Soriano? Is this a guy that the Marlins could continue to have maybe next season or so forth? He's putting on these, I believe he has 13 innings. His ERA is under 2. He's performed in these spots again, maybe where it has been the score is a little widened and he's against these teams. But he pitched well against Arizona. He pitched well against the Braves. He played against the A's and a plethora of other teams. What have you seen from Soriano? This is a guy that can be a mainstay in the Marlins bullpen long term.
I'd say this outing was more encouraging than any of the others, considering the quality of the competition, how he went into the game much earlier than he reasonably thought he could. And what I was looking at most of all is like the second time through the lineup. He stayed in so long that he faced a lot of these Braves hitters for a second time in the game in order to eat innings, but also, he was amazing. He didn't allow a single hit in this one. He got some good chases with his slider out of the zone. This was, from what I saw earlier in the year, I didn't really see anything that made me all that optimistic in terms of him as a current season option. Somebody that was really any better than the rest of their bullpen mainstays. This past appearance that he had, considering everything that was involved with that, very encouraging. And I think it's something to keep an eye on as this season goes on. We'll see. Matt Barnes, is Kevin touched on, throwing back-to-back days. He's going to be back this weekend if there's no setback. We'll see how Barnes does. He wasn't lighting the world on fire, before his injury. So between him and Brazoban as somebody that was good at times, bad at times, he's just been so inconsistent. If there ever is an opening in this bullpen as we get past the middle of the year into the second half, I think Soriano is now, we'll see, depending if he is the same version of effectiveness in AAA, and he hadn't actually been pitching well in AAA prior to this call up. But if he is, this is somebody to keep an eye on that actually could be an interesting difference maker in August and September if it looks like this again. The problem has been consistency with him. So he has to now continue to shove in AAA for his next handful of appearances. But I would not be surprised if he gets back here before the end of the year.
Yeah, and with that, I wanted to go ahead and talk about, obviously, what everyone's here for, what everyone's here to watch. Everyone at the stadium is obviously there for us to watch Dane Myers play baseball. Not in the lineup. As we see here, he's looking more jacked than our own Luis Adeoye. He could probably bench 5 Isaacs, looking like that. But no, Dane Myers is having an incredible 2023. I believe he's slugging almost to fire. He's playing incredible for a guy that was a Rule 5 draft pick not so long ago. So for Travis, Eli, Nick, for whoever wants to step up first, what do you guys think of Dane Myers, and how do you think he's going to fit with the Marlins now that Jazz is on the IL?
I think the coolest thing about Dane Myers is getting to the big leagues is just the story with him in general, starting as a pitcher, now being a hitter, now in the bigs. So I think that's just a super exciting thing and a cool thing to see, just the story behind it. I think that's really exciting for him. And then, I'm just excited because he's been tearing it up in Jacksonville, where it's hopefully this can progress into the big leagues. That's the hope. You never know, but he's been absolutely tearing up, and I think he's well-deserved his shot to step up and get into this opportunity. And with how third base, with how Gene has been, it's a little debatable of who should really be playing there. So if he can come up for a week and really kill it, There's going to be no reason to send him down if he could prove himself to be there. I think he's a guy that could stay on the roster. There's a possibility of it if he really shows.
Yeah, and with Dane, Eli, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Does he have the highest OPS of all Marlins minor leaguers, or does he have the highest OPS of all just Marlins in general in the entire organization from major league to bottom with a 9.56 OPS?
Well, let me bring this up. This is the highest WRC plus in AAA across all of minor league baseball this season for AAA hitters. He is number 1. And that's that, where 100 is league average. He's at 202, 102% better than league average as a hitter in AAA. And you see the names that are right below him on that list. Matt McLain is on. He's been amazing in the majors since getting called up early in the year. You see Nolan Jones. He's been great for the Rockies. Christopher Morel, same thing. It's a mixed bag. You don't know exactly what you're getting. A lot of guys that have success in AAA, it doesn't translate at all. It's just when you're having this extreme level of offensive success over any sort of meaningful sample, those guys at the very top of the heap, there's reason to be very excited about. There are some similarities between Dane and where we were with Charles LeBlanc at this time a year ago, right? Where he was putting up, he was the best hitter at AAA. People were calling for him to get called up. It took a little bit longer. He didn't get his opportunity until the very end of July. I think it was a few weeks later than Dane is getting his. This level of success, though, even transcends what LeBlanc was doing. To have a 12.01 OPS since getting called up after he was playing great at AA, and for him to continue that and then some at Jacksonville, this level of production is video game numbers. It is even better than Luis Ariz, right? We thought we were conditioned to think of Luis Ariz as the highest level of offensive amazingness, and yet this guy was doing it at an even higher level before his call up to earn this opportunity. I think of him a lot as like a rich man's LeBlanc, where he is more athletic defensively, and as you saw from the shirtless pick, he is in shape. He runs better. He hits the ball harder, and that stuff matters. That makes a difference between line drive doubles into the gap and line drive home runs. So I'd expect more over the fence power from him. He's a better base runner. He's 16 of 17 in stolen base opportunities in barely half a season in the minors between AA and AAA. He's exciting. I'm not very high on his defense, even though he's versatile. He's more of a positionless guy than he is an actual utility guy. So we'll see exactly where they use him. That needs some work, and kind of understandable because he spent so much of his time focusing on pitching instead of being a position player. So that stuff is relatively new for him. But this is really exciting. This is a player that I wouldn't be surprised if he sticks on the active roster the rest of the year, kind of like LeBlanc did last year. I'll be curious to see how they use him, because I'm kind of skeptical that he starts on a regular basis with Segura. In the way, I think most people would agree that just on the merits of their skills and just being realistic with Segura has done this year, that Myers should be playing more than Segura has at this point, and that he should be the primary guy maybe at that position, because third base is one of the positions he plays. But I am going to be on the conservative side with estimating his role. I think it's going to be kind of a half-time, part-time role as a starter in the infield corners and outfield corners, and they'll make it bigger pretty soon if he performs. Once again, it'll just come down a lot to how he performs in his first few weeks on the roster. Then they'll have an interesting decision to make when Jazz gets healthy or when the trade deadline approaches, whichever of those comes first.
Yeah. And with that, I think is a perfect time to go ahead and mention yes, 440 average, just incredible from Dane Myers. Let's see, maybe you can keep that going. Maybe not 400, but let's see you get somewhere around that in the majors. But this is a perfect time to go on our break. We're going to have a break, and then coming out of that break, we're going to talk about the All-Star selections. We're going to go ahead and preview this Cardinals and Marlins series, and we're going to give you a whole bunch of more information after this break. So stay tuned. we are back. Welcome back to FOF Live, presented by La Pop, LAPOP. Don't forget, you can check them out on Instagram, Twitter, and at their Doral location. Let's go ahead and preview this series coming up against the Cardinals. It's a 4-game set, 4 games, so there could be a split in one. Now we'll get into that with predictions. The Cardinals are coming in, I believe, under 10 games, 500. Just not the team that people expected them to be, and they are coming in today with Miles Michaelis, who just signed a large extension prior to the season, going up against Braxton Garrett. We're gonna have Jesus Luzardo, Yuri, and the final start. I'm not sure. We could probably get more on that, but Travis, Marlins going up against the Cardinals, 4-game set. Even though they are not playing the way that people expected, the Cardinals could still give Marlins trouble. We've seen that for plenty of years. How do you expect the Marlins to face the Cardinals, and maybe what you're expecting from this game?
Well, I'm a little more excited now after that piece on Dane Myers. That, man, between the shirtless pick and the 440 average, I feel like he's going to do some impressive things. No, I think you nailed it when you said historically the Marlins don't seem to do well against the Cardinals. And even though the Cardinals seem to be on a down year and we seem to be on an up year, like I'm real nervous about it. I think we all think the Brave series was a punch in the gut, and then we fell down and then some kicks in the ribs after that. So this is one of their first big tests of resiliency for the team right now. So I don't know. I could see it going either way, where they're still a little shell shocked after getting completely dismantled the last 3 games, or maybe they rebound, they come home and they get some inspirational speeches from Skip, they get some an injection of life from Dane, and they do really well. I thought it was an interesting point that I think I forget who made earlier, but yeah, the Cardinals have some weak pitching right now and some really big bats. And those bats maybe haven't done everything they're capable of doing, but they could go off at any time. So I think one of the keys to the series is see if our hitters can rebound and take advantage of the apparent weak pitching. So I'm going to be looking at that.
Yeah, and coming in, I believe, looking at some of their starting pitching, if you just take out Jordan Montgomery with a 3.28 ERA, Miles Michaelis comes in as the second highest with a 4.44, and every other pitcher has an ERA above that. So starting pitching is a weak point for the Cardinals, and to go along with that, you look at some of their bullpen names that do stand out. You have Jordan Hicks, who still throws like 110 miles per hour. He'll still throw heat to the Marlins. You have Giovanni Gallegos, and just a whole bunch of just other players there, like Genesis Cabrera, but his ERA is around 5. And then also, you look at tomorrow, we'll talk about that with the Marlins going up against Adam Wainwright and him there. But Nick, I wanted to talk to you. Probably the players that maybe most people are going to have their eyes on for the Cardinals is just Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. 2 future Hall of Famers, an MVP last season. Nolan starting, I believe, his 8th All-Star game in a row. What did you see from those 2 players, and how do you think the Marlins can handle those guys who are also both coming in, I believe, to LDP after the WBC?
I mean, when you look at both of them, it's like you were just saying, they're future Hall of Famers, so you can't doubt them in any case, in any series. No matter what, they can get something going, and they've been decent for the Cardinals this year. They're the 2 kind of ones that are supposed to be carrying this team, which I feel like the rest of the bats have been killer for them. But they're definitely 2 guys to be huge on. Whenever they're up, you got to watch out for them. They're always a threat to get on base. And another one, like we're saying, is Jordan Walker has been pretty hot lately, a really young top prospect, and he's been hot lately. Arenado's been a little hot lately. So going into it, I would expect kind of Arenado, Walker, and Goldschmidt to really be the 3 that drive. If the Cardinals do have a lot of offense for some Marlins, it's going to be those 3 really driving it in there.
Yeah, just the way they're playing. Eli, probably almost the same question, but what guys are you looking at on this Cardinals side batting wise? Maybe let's go out of Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. Who are you looking at here that could potentially give the Marlins trouble?
It's still a deep lineup. I should go back really quickly to that other leaderboard I showed from the top AAA hitters, because there was a Cardinal on here, not that far below Dane Myers, in the where is he? Number 9 spot.
9.
Lucan Baker. Lucan Baker was really tearing it up at AAA, and he is actually in the lineup tonight. So he's another guy that was having success at video game like level at the highest level of the minors that maybe can bring that forward into the majors. And at least to this point, they trust him enough to put him in the lineup against lefties, if nothing else. So that's one under the radar guy to keep an eye on. With Jordan Walker, I do want to reiterate like how impressive he looked in spring training, how widely regarded he was as a prospect entering this year on the short list of very best prospects in baseball. And he has finally seemingly put it together after his first stint wasn't anything special, got sent down. And since he got back up, he had one of the longest hitting streaks that we've seen from any player in baseball so far this season. So he's been really consistent offensively, even though he rates so badly defensively. Depending on how you look at it, his defense is about as bad as any regular outfielder in the majors because it's a new position for him. That's going to be a big storyline for this series, is the defense of the Cardinals. That's been the difference between their actual good teams in recent years and this year, where they have been so awful. They are on the short list of worst defensive teams in baseball. And that has been such a terrible combination because they have a pitching staff that relies on balls in play from everybody, from, as an example, with Walker, but also on the other end, even with Nolan Arenado, defensively, he has not played up to his usual standards. And it seems like his run of winning Gold Gloves every single year is going to come to an end unless he really turns it back on in the second half. That's been the one thing holding back the Cardinals, costing them in a lot of really tight games, is that they are just not as efficient at converting outs as they have been, even with some of these same players as the year before and the year before that.
Yeah, looking at with just all these players here, we mentioned, I believe I saw they're 13 games under 500. Do you believe this is a team that could be a seller, or are the Cardinals just in the way that they still believe that they have the firepower to make a run to the postseason? You see their 10 games out of first with, potentially weak NL Central there. But how do you guys see the St. Louis Cardinals coming into the trade deadline? And are there some players there that could potentially be future Marlins?
Right. Well, I put two sets of records here on the screen. You see their actual record and you see the expected record on the far right. By the run differential, they would only be 5 games back of the Cubs. But in reality, they're 10 games back. And it's not only that they're 10 games back of the division, they're basically 10 games back of both the Brewers and the Reds. So it's hard enough to overcome that deficit in less than half a season, but to do it against two separate teams, one in the Brewers that is consistently right near the top of the division and has a lot of experience, the other in the Reds that I think has as much raw talent as any of these teams in the Central. If I was them, I would sell pretty hard. I would put no stock in rallying in the second half of the season because this is just a big deficit. And even when it looked like they were turning things around in early and mid-May, they've fallen back into the slump again, where they just don't look like a very complete team, a fundamentally sound team. And I don't think the pitching staff is going to magically flip a switch and start striking out guys. That's kind of what they need to somehow turn the season around, is their pitchers to get better and not rely on their defense, which is not getting the job done. So I think they should sell. I think they will sell at least the rental guys, where Jordan Montgomery, Jordan Hicks, those are pending free agents. So the big question is what they do with the players that have years of control remaining, the ones that are more closely associated with the core of their team. Mm-hmm. But besides those guys, they also have an extra outfielder problem. They have a surplus of outfielders. With the Marlins, now that Jazz is out again for a period of time, now that Sanchez and De La Cruz have kind of fallen back to earth again as not necessarily everyday players, and now that Soler, he does his best work as a DH, and is probably going to leave via free agency after the season anyway. This once again looks like a pretty logical fit for the Marlins to pick up a veteran outfielder for the Cardinals if everybody gets healthy at the same time, and yet they still decide that they need to switch things up.
Yeah, just looking at most of the players there, I think, when Marlins fans look at the roster for the Cardinals. Obviously, guys like Paul Goldschmidt and Leonardo will probably be dream players to get, but I don't believe they're going to trade them anytime soon. Guys most likely that could be traded, I would probably say Brendan Donovan, Paul DeJong, and you look at some of the core guys, one that would probably take more of a larger price would be someone like Lars Nootbaar, who's been almost a core piece for them, since almost his breaking down in the WBC and what we've seen from him. Travis, when you're looking at the Cardinals roster or just overall in baseball, how do you see maybe the Marlins in terms of being a buyer? Do you see them as a big buyer? Do you see them looking at some of these Cardinals players? How would you approach the deadline if you were Kim?
Oh man, I hope we're buyers, right? Because I'm on the payroll clearly, but no, I feel like the team has been sellers for a couple decades now, so this is a really exciting time, relatively speaking, to be a Marlins fan, and we're closer to. I think the last stats I saw, even after getting swept, one of those stats things gives us a 66% chance of making the playoffs this year. This is a great opportunity for the team. So I really hope we do some buy-in, and I think we could never have enough bats. Jazz is a guy that I love to watch on the field, but he's sadly not on the field all that much this year, and we really do have a hole there. So I don't know the Cardinals roster quite as well as you guys, but if they've got some extra outfielders who can get on base, I'm all in favor of using them to plug some holes. The question I would ask, I guess, is what are the chips that the Marlins have that they can use to buy with that we're comfortable giving up,
Yeah. And Nick, also, I want to ask you about trade pieces. How do you see the Marlins again approaching it? And do you see maybe in terms of who do you think on the Marlins would probably be most likely to go if they do make a trade?
I think it's a lot of, for the Marlins approach at the trade deadline, I think it's kind of a look at yourself in the mirror thing and say, do we have the possibility to win a World Series going into the trade deadline? And I think when you look at the Marlins roster, it's hard to say hitters wise, but when you look at the pitching, you could realistically say, hey, if these pitchers get really, really hot going into the playoffs and start throwing out games, you could win a couple games 2-1, 2-0, 3-1. So I think that's where the Marlins realistically have a good shot in the postseason if they get there, winning a series and things just bouncing their way. So I think they really should be conservative kind of buyers at the deadline. Like, I don't think you can throw everything out there. And I think it's a hard decision on who to give up, because I know a guy like Braxton has been tossed out a lot, but it's hard to give him up when you see the injuries we've had with pitchers. You don't want to give up that pitching depth when you presumably think the Marlins have a lot of pitching depth, but with guys getting hurt now, with Edward Cabrera getting hurt. And then Sixto is just a question of, you never know with that. So it's really hard to say a guy to give up. And with the hitters, there's not a huge amount of MLB guys, at least on the Marlins, that it's easy to just give up one of those. I mean, Avi is one that you would like to trade, but who are you really realistically going to get from that? So that's where it's kind of a hard thing that the Marlins don't have a ton to give up, that they'd actually be willing to give up. That'd be a smart decision.
Right. Yeah. One guy that could be a trade candidate, depending on how this next month goes, is maybe they sell high on Dane Myers, somebody that they picked up essentially off the scrap heap during the offseason and has now been performing so well in the minors. But as I said, there are still some questions exactly how he's going to fit in defensively, and you never really know how the bat is going to play immediately. So that's somebody that if you want to look at players that you sell high on that you didn't even think would be assets coming into the year, that's one. Somebody you mentioned that I think would be the most substantial piece that they could realistically move is Edward Cabrera, because he is on track, and we'll see if he has any setbacks. But for now, barring any setbacks, he's on track to get stretched out as a starter right in time for the trade deadline. Should be like the last week of July is when he should be all clear to go. Before his injury, there were like really legitimate questions about whether or not he is a starting pitcher moving forward. He's somebody that could be a starter, and when he's on top of his game, he looks like a potential top of the rotation guy just because of the quality of his stuff and all the pitches that he has. It's just that he has such chronic issues with his health and also just throwing strikes. Like, his control comes and goes. usually within single starts as well. So he's somebody that would have, I think, still substantial value to other teams because how young he is and how much potential he has in terms of like how much he really helps a playoff contending team right now. It's almost it's just a total guess just because of how inconsistent he is. And even when he's healthy, he's not usually going deep into games. So he would still have a lot of value, I think, more so than any of their actual prospects at the moment. And yet, if they feel enough confidence in Brian Hoeing, it depends how long the leash is on Yeri in the second half of the season and how many starts they think they can get from him. That'll be a big factor. And then, unfortunately, Johnny Cueto is going to lean into that as well. If they actually believe that Cueto has some sort of role at the very back of their rotation, that makes it easier to trade from the rest of their rotation mix. I'm so pessimistic on that. I can't say it enough. You know, how little confidence I have in Cueto. Let's actually do a live check-in on how he is doing in AAA because their game just started 10 minutes ago. I think he has onto the mound already.
Over under half a home run.
Oh, I think tough luck because they're in a rain delay.
Oh,
what are the odds? I thought that would be great to check in after one inning of work, see how it went. So we'll see if they actually get the game in because that also affects things as well. For better or worse, it's important to know what Cueto's schedule to get built up is. Anyway, Edward Cabrera is somebody that I have circled. If they want to make a substantial splash, if you want to just get a rental, I don't think it would even cost that much. And they're in that interesting spot, right, where I think there are rentals that make a lot of sense. At the same time, this team is not all about 2023. Ideally, a lot of your moves you want to plan on the next couple of years to be your window, not just this year. So it would have to. There are names we've already thrown out over the course of the last few weeks, like Yan Gomes at catcher or Jeimer Candelario at third base. I like those guys, and I think they're at a price where Marlins could get them without even giving up one of their top-tier prospects. Aside from that, yeah, you got to get really creative. You got to get creative, and you need to hope that there are more teams that jump into the selling situation, including a team like the Cardinals. You know, I am holding out hope that the Cardinals are going to be selling quite a bit of their pieces because they're going to recognize that this year just is not their year. And if that happens, you could go through a lot of their outfielders as guys that are potentially available that all have control beyond this year and would be available if the Marlins are willing to send back pitching in exchange. So at the high end, it's Lars Nootbaar. At the lower end, it's Alec Burleson and Tyler O'Neill, guys like that, where I could definitely see that working out.
Yeah, and with all that, Eli, if you have the lineups, we can go ahead and talk about tonight's game versus the St. Louis Cardinals. And you're wondering about the pitching matchup. We are getting Miles Michaelis going up against Braxton Garrett. This is almost a complete opposite of what we saw against the Braves series, where it seemed like their entire lineup was just full on red. But you see some of the red there, just predominantly with guys that you would expect it. You have Paul Goldschmidt. You even have Wilson Contreras, who maybe having a really down, just really confusing year, putting him in the outfield, catcher, not really sure what they're doing there with him. And Eli, you mentioned Luken Baker is the DH for them with Jordan Walker in left field. You mentioned Walker's defense. Do you see him more playing in the left field, or maybe why do you think they're not putting him in DH, since you mentioned his defense leaves a little to be desired?
Yeah, well, you could probably say the same thing with Luken Baker as well. I don't think his defense is super highly regarded. This is the problem with the team, where they have several spots that they're not getting good D from. And they're in a situation where they want to develop Walker as well. They want to they recognize that he's going to be a big part of their future. And if it's going to be more likely in the outfield than in the infield where he was accustomed to playing, then those reps are necessary long term. So I think that's part of it as well, where even at this stage of the season, they haven't committed to selling, but they've also understood that they have to balance 2023 in the long term as well. I would imagine that's part of it. Getting him his reps, being confident that he'll get better as the season goes on, even if he gets more reps, because it could not be worse than the level of defense he's played so far this year, where he's just you could just tell how out of place he is and how it's still just so foreign to him.
Yeah, and then another guy there that I believe was just a huge trade candidate for the Marlins not too long ago, Dylan Carlson. Having type of year with a 711 OPS, 245 average, 391 slugging. Nick, when you see that lineup there for the Cardinals, just how are you looking at it? Maybe let's go and talk about maybe guys like a Wilson Contreras, who's signed a big contract but is not really providing the type of stats that the Cardinals would like. And then you just have a whole bunch of other guys, maybe like a Luken Baker, Paul Jong. What are you looking at in that lineup for you?
I've been looking at this lineup today, especially with Brax on the mound for today. They don't really strike out a lot, which for Braxton has been striking out more than usual. Braxton is a more contact pitcher, so if he gets them swinging a lot, that's a good thing. They also don't walk they walk a decent amount, I would say more than average-ish. They're about 9th in walk percentage I was looking at. So I would say for Braxton, that's a positive thing. To me, I would say he gets a lot of contact on people. So if he's able to get contact and just right into fielders, I think that's a huge thing. And I mean, like you said earlier, you can just see the top of the order is filled with a lot of red, but then as you go down, it kind of slows down in that area. So that top of the order is going to be big with Goldschmidt, Arenado right up there, and with how Walker's been hitting lately, that big three. And with Wilson Contreras, he's had that up and down year, but we know what Wilson Contreras can do. We've seen him with the Cubs, so he's another guy where if he can very well have a good series where he gets 2 home runs in these 3 games or 2 in just 1 game. So he's a really exciting guy just always watching. And Lars Nootbaar rounds out that lineup really good at the back end. He's a really good professional hitter when you look at him. He walks a lot, has a good eye, takes a lot of pitches, so he's a good guy to flip the top of the order. But I think it's a good matchup for Brax going into this game, though.
Yeah. And Travis, I want to tell you, we talk the complete opposite, going for the Cardinals to talk about the Marlins. They're going with Rise, Soler, kind of what we've seen before with De La, and we have Gene Segura there almost rounding it out with the bottom 3. What do you see from this Marlins lineup, and how do you think they're going to fare against Miles Michaelis and the Cards tonight?
It's hard for me to guess how they're going to fare because I really don't know if they're still reeling from that Brave series or if they just put it behind them and they're ready to go. But things I'm looking at, Nick Fortes, I think we don't have a lot of production out of our catcher spot right now. And I'd love to see anyone step up and, get on base a little bit more. De La Cruz, I'm really excited for him to maybe get it together again at some point this season. I think with, Arise showing like he was doing pretty well that final game of the Braves series, and Soler, as we were talking about earlier, able to get on base a lot. I think De La Cruz is going to have some opportunities with runners in scoring position, and I hope he can capitalize. So for me, it's that, making the most of the top 3 guys, and then maybe getting some random help from a Garrett Cooper or a Joey Wendell, who I thought looked very nice so far this season, or Jonathan Davis.
Yeah. Eli, I want to ask you, Trevor just mentioned Jonathan Davis. This is a guy that the Marlins just acquired not so long ago, training one of their minor leaguers for him, a guy who's provided really good, pretty good offensive numbers, okay defensively, just there for until Jazz comes back. Well, Jazz comes back, he gets injured again, and now Jonathan Davis has to take over center field once again. What have you seen for Davis just so far, and do you think he could keep this up while Jazz is out?
He continues to impress me. He continues to be better than I thought. We were live on stream right after he was acquired, and we were all shitting on the move. We're like, this is desperate. This guy is probably not any better than Jake Mangum or some of the other players that they have in AAA. He's had his shots in the majors before, and he simply hasn't produced. And he continues to just be a really fundamentally sound player. He's a good defensive player in center field, which is not a small thing. He makes a decent amount of contact, and he makes productive outs when they need to move runners aboard, to get runs in, even without obviously hitting the ball hard. I don't know if he'll hit another more than 1 or 2 homers the rest of this entire season. He does enough with the small things to, I think, make him comfortably better than replacement level to keep a role on this team. I don't think he should be the main everyday center fielder while Jazz is out. I think they were kind of fortunate the way that things unfolded during that stretch of time. He's still going to play quite a bit. Something that one of our super subscribers, Marcel DeVivo, he brought up to me is that this probably means a lot of center field for Jesus Sanchez. They were already toying around with that a little bit last month. He's not a good defensively there. It's just that his bat needs to be in the lineup quite a bit regardless. And now that Dane Myers is up and Dane can play the corner spots, that's something they may experiment with. You might see Sanchez starting quite a bit in center field for as long as Jazz is out. So Davis is fine, whether he's starting or coming off the bench as a pinch runner, defensive replacement. At this moment, he's definitely their best defensive center field option. So he's going to be used a lot. He's been good so far. They just shouldn't, they shouldn't lean too much on it. Don't get greedy with the fact that you've extracted so much value out of him. He's still, he's still a bit role player on a contending team, and it shouldn't be much more than that.
Yeah. And with that, I think it's a perfect time to get into our predictions. So Eli, go have at it.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
It's time, for predictions. And for this series, it's going to be unlike the other ones, where it's 4 games. So you could have the Marlins winning it, the Cardinals winning it, or you could have a series split. And don't forget, for MVP, it can be from either team, and it could be a pitcher, a batter. And if you go with the Marlins, the MVP does not have to be from the Marlins.
This is how you know Brian watches a lot of the shows. He sent this in like 15 minutes ago with the Kim Eng clip that we had there. Yeah, let me get our super subscribers up there and see what they're predicting for this. Quite a bit of optimism overall. Only a couple actually had the Cardinals winning the series. It's tough to win a series.
Mm-hmm.
These 4-game series, they almost always go down the middle. That's what history
Brian's
says.
MVP pick there with Dane Myers. He's probably hoping he plays and starts the other games and goes off there, since he's not in the lineup for this one. You have Nolan. You have Jordan Walker, who could potentially break out or go out this entire series, and just a couple Marlins sweeps. And sweeping is hard in Major League Baseball, and it gets the Cardinals in 4 games. Might seem like a tall task for the Fish, but maybe they could get it done. Eli, do we have video of Kevin? Let's get to that.
Quick one, yes.
Ooh.
All right, Fish on First Live series predictions. I'll go first. Marlins will split the series, and I'm going to go with Yuri Perez as my MVP.
I'm going to go with Kevin. I believe they split this bad boy. They lose tonight, though. And I'm going to go with Luis Ariz for MVP.
We have Andres.
I think Marlins take this series 3-1, and the MVP is going to be Jorge Soler.
All right, Eli, back to you.
All right, short and sweet with special guest Andres Bolivar, helping Kevin Isaac there. So with our predictions, don't forget, become a super subscriber, $3 a month, and that could be you on a super subscriber list, getting first pick and joining us for our contest, potentially win some goodies at the end of the year. And we're looking here at the leaderboard. We have Williams, Romeo, we have Kevin, we have Eli, and we have me at the bottom, or not even on the list, I think.
I think I may have screwed this up at some point. I don't know how Grant's got that high up on the leaderboard. I feel like he was way down there. Maybe he is on a great run. I don't know. I went back and looked at it to see if I screwed up at one point, but maybe not. So kudos to Grant. He is the top performing FOF staffer to this point in the season.
All right. And with that, let's go ahead and start our predictions. And lead off. Turn next.
I think I'm going to go 3-1 Marlins, be a little confident. I think Jesus Sanchez is going to step on it this series, and he's going to be my MVP.
All right. Travis.
I think it's a coin flip between 3-1, 1-3 Marlins. But I'm deciding right now, guys. I'm deciding 3-1 Marlins. De La Cruz is going to get it done.
Ooh, okay. I'll go. I'm going to go with Travis there. I think the Marlins are going to rebound from that Braves series and beat the Cardinals 3-1. And my series MVP, let's go with Mr. 400, Luis Ariz. Eli.
I have a series split between these teams in this 4-game set with Brian De La Cruz as MVP. This Cardinals rotation and bullpen and whole pitching staff is super vulnerable. I think DLC is going to make a lot of contact, a lot of loud contact. So he's going to go off during these 4 games.
All right. You heard it there. For all predictions, you want to join in, become a member to become a super subscriber. And that's going to do it for us here, exactly hitting 1 hour. Go enjoy this 4-game set versus the Cardinals. Go have a great July 4th for everyone watching. For Daniel, for Nick, for Travis, Eli, for Kevin, and Isaac at the ballpark. This is FOF Live presented by La Pop. As always, go Fish.